So this question of what is psychosis, I just wanted to run through it real quick, what psychosis is for Lacan, of course. So there are, for Lacan, 2 or 3, depending on who you ask, structures. How the mind is constructed around different registers. Neurotic, you almost instinctively know that, and it's essentially sort of Woody Allen neurotic, but OCD and somatic disorders and just people who are always a wreck. That's neurotic. Then you have psychotic. So what is psychosis for Lacan? The very first thing that I would say is that it's not, it is madness, but it's not bad. Psychosis is not a negative or a positive. It doesn't necessarily mean, for example, schizophrenia. I just know that we usually think of that word psychosis as meaning so bad. And in general, it does mean batshit crazy. But Lacan, for whatever reason, himself being pretty batshit crazy, leaves the name psychosis, which is a bad idea because it sounds so horrible every time you say it. Anyway, the psychotic is essentially someone who blocks something, fundamentally blocks it out, and it affects their language. So you see it the most extreme in schizophrenia. It's why their words are so concrete and all over the place, all the way to the most benign of symptoms. So remember, we're talking about a structure, but I was going to say like Asperger type symptoms. The telltale sign for Lacan is if there's even minor disorders in language, such as apraxia, dyslexia. But so it's essentially where you block out the father. Let's say that. For Lacan, everything is a metaphor of a metaphor of a metaphor, but it's essentially, so he would say it blocks out the name of the father. To be more specific, it forecloses the name of the father. But it's essentially, you have your dad. It doesn't necessarily mean dad, but let's run with that. And you block him out fundamentally. You foreclose, not necessarily him, but that which lays down the law. In this case, what Lacan would say, in a way, the symbolic law. That who instills negation. This thing, the example would be with Foucault. How people always get him wrong, and they say he's talking about, how the man keeps us down, the patriarchy keeps us down. No, he's actually saying, he's saying 2 things, that it works both top down and top up. But my point would be that the law, in the example of Foucault, only negates. It doesn't tell you what you can do, it tells you what not to do. And similarly, the function of the, let's say, symbolic father for Lacan is to pretend that it's not there, this fundamental thing. Let's use the example, the typical example of the actual father, of not having that which he instills, that negation, who lays down the law, if you will, and pretending as if it's not there. And this fundamentally affects their relationship to the world, namely for Lacan, what he calls the imaginary. That is to say, they tend to be more fantastic imaginary than others. This is why so many artists are psychotic. And artists are a good example because it shows a later development of Lacan, that of the synthome, where he talks about the psychotics essentially making their own solution out of that, delusional metaphor, but something that can keep the psychotic from unraveling and unraveling. Psychosis is actually explored more by Lacanians and neurosis more by Freudians. People have this assumption that, we should talk about psychosis, because Lacan never really goes over the technical details of how to work psychosis. He tells you how to preliminarily do it, just very face-to-face. But he doesn't give you clear guidelines on how to work with psychosis. But he starts off with his psychiatric dissertation, his obsession with Schreber, and then he really, as he would say, you got to look from the psychotic out, go from the psychotic to the neurotic, that there's that psychotic core in all of us. But I think the most important part there is that he fundamentally blocks something out. He can't deal with it from the very get-go, blocks out the father. Now this can get worse with trauma, for example, and then that will be a repetition, and it will continue, that will block it out even more, or it will be a primal reminder. So divorce, just absent fathers, guys that just aren't quite there, and then actual absent fathers, which we have such a big problem with today. So it would be no surprise that we get more psychotically structured people. And remember, structure and symptoms are not synonymous, but that we would indeed have more psychotic symptoms, you know, ranging from your everyday manic depressive to the sort of Asperger's kind of guy to more hard stuff, but we're not seeing a big, huge upswing in schizophrenia per se. We're just all becoming more schizophrenic. Huh, that's a nice note to leave it on, perhaps. Thank you.